Okay, so I am gonna show you how to throw. We're gonna strive for a 9-inch dessert plate that is just a sort of a shallow curve. Can somebody grab me a ruler? This is 3 pounds of clay. This might be too much. This might be the right amount, but that's what we're gonna start with. So I've cleaned my wheel off. I'm gonna just put a little bit of water down so that this thing sticks. Okay, and so I'm just gonna go ahead and center this ball of clay. I'm gonna center it in a bit of a low, wide shape. So we're going to start with kind of a similar shape of what we're gonna make, right? So when we're making the bowls, we were starting with more of a kind of a bowl, maybe a half of a grapefruit shape. Here we're gonna start with a low, wide disc because that's gonna be the shape we're making. The plate, I'm gonna try and get 9 inches wide with this clay. That's what I'd like it to be. I'm going to next. You what? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm just coning it up. Now, when you're making these, just like you do with the bowls, I would recommend, wedging up 4 or 5 balls of clay at once and trying to sit down and throw things in series. They're going to be more consistent if you do it that way, as opposed to coming in, throwing 1 or 2, coming in, throwing 1 or 2. Because what you're doing is you're building muscle memory within that session, and they're going to become more uniform as you sit there and make them. So I do want you to make 3 of these for Monday. And I'd like you to try and sit down and make them all at once, if you can. So come in, throw a slab down on the mold, wedge up some clay, throw your 3 plates. Okay, so I'm just getting this thing centered, which it's not really wanting to do. Cone it up another time. I'm not cone it back down. So I'm just cleaning off my hands. I don't like them to be too messy because then I can't see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to try and give this a final squeeze on center, and there it is. And I'm going to clean up the floor, the wheel head here, because I'm going to be pushing this down and out. As I'm going down and out, it's going to need to stick to this surface. And if it's too wet and it's got tons of slip, it's not going to stick. So I'm going to clean my piece of clay off, and I'm still trying to keep this thing on center, so I'm not just pushing down with my top hand. If I'm just pushing down with my top hand, the side of this is going to become off center. So I do need to push back a little bit with my side hand, but it's more pressure. So it's still that same kind of relationship as you're coning the thing down. You're just going a little bit further, right? So we are going to go down into this kind of nice flat pancake. Could you get a ruler? Ah, it's right there. Okay, great. So if we're going to go to 9 inches, I'd like you to have a base. Let's see the ruler. Let's see what this is. Yeah, I'd like you to have a base that's 6 inches wide. So your centered ball of clay should be 6 inches wide. And that's going to give you wide enough floor. And that means we really only have to pull 1.5 inches on each side in order to get to 9. So it's not a huge move. But this is way too thick, right? So we do need to go down and open this floor of this plate up. We are going to leave a good 1/2 inch of clay in the bottom so that we can flip these over and trim them out. Or maybe I take that back. Let's go 1/2 inch. Let's go 1/2 inch on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to just start in the center, and I'm pushing down. I'm not going to go down very deep because I don't want to go down to the floor. I'm going to go down. I'm going to stop my wheel, take my knife, or you can take your noodle tool, check the thickness of the floor. It's a little thicker than we want, so I'm gonna go down a little bit further. Too fast. I need to grease that. So I'm just going down a little bit more. Stop that and I'll check it again. There we go, that's about a 1/2 inch. So that's a great thickness. And so now, kind of a medium speed, I can take that clay and I'm gonna start to walk it out in trying to come kind of as flat as I can, but it's going to be a little bit of a swoop. And I'm supporting on the outside so that I don't just pull this clay out. And I'm using the sponge behind my fingers, which I find helpful. Or you can just use your fingers. I like it because it gives me a little bit of lubrication from the clay, so there's not so much friction. Okay. And then this is raised up. I want to incorporate this back into my wall of clay, so I'm just supporting on either side, and with the sponge kind of largely broadcasting and compressing this back into the rim. And then I'll come back because I've got a kind of a bumpy situation happening here. I'm going to come back and again and just bring this clay out. And what I'm looking for here is a plate that is, you know, wide and shallow, and it's just going to swoop up. So we're just going to continue this shape as we come out. But I need to come out a little bit wider. I want this curve to come out kind of to the middle of my my ball of clay here. And the sponge behind your fingers kind of acts like a rib, but it's, you know, it's more your fingers than it is. Feels a little bit more connected, I think, than using a rib. Sometimes a rib can feel a little bit cumbersome. So I'm just slowly coming out, and I'm just stretching this out. I'm kind of opening the ball of clay, if you will. And I'm spending a lot of time compressing this floor and coming back and forth, right? Because the widest part of this, we're not going to be able to touch the bottom until this thing's leather hard, right? So we want to make sure that we really spend some time compressing here, especially right in the center, so that this doesn't have more shrinkage to do and a crack open up here. So now I'm going to compress that rim essentially again. I'm going to take my finger on the outside and just push in a little bit. And pushing in is rising this donut of clay up. And that's going to allow my fingers to get underneath it. Okay? And now I can start, and I'm lifting from underneath, and I'm just starting to taper this form. And I'm going to try and come up more at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to carefully release before the rim. Come back and support and round this rim off, because we want a nice round soft rim, again, for the application of things clanging around the restaurant. But I want to come up at a 45-degree angle, because if I pull this out like on a 30-degree angle and I keep pulling and pulling and pulling, if it gets too wet and it starts to get wiggly, it's going to collapse over. So if you keep this concave shape and you keep it coming up on a 45-degree angle, one of the last things we're going to do is stretch it a little bit flatter. But essentially we're making a big saucer, right? You can kind of think about that. And again, this shape that we're making here is a wedge. You're going to have a lot of clay behind here, more so than in the other bowl form that you had, because that was more vertical. But this needs a lot more wet clay down here in order to support it, okay? So I'm going to come back and I'm going to compress my round rim. And I want to be careful about how much water I'm using. You're not hosing this thing down, and anytime I get like a lot of water or glossy water on this, you'll notice that I'm taking it off with my sponge. So we want to try and limit the amount of water. And I'll just take a measurement just to kind of see where I'm at. I'm at almost 8 inches, so I need to go essentially a 1/2 inch more, right? And this is still pretty thick, so I'm going to lift from the bottom, and I'm going to slowly bring my hands up, carefully releasing before that nice juicy rim. I also want my rim to stay a little bit fatter, because as we stretch it out for its final stretch, it will become thinner. Right, so you don't want to have your rim be the final thickness here and then stretch it and have it become too skinny. As you're coming out on plates, you'll notice that your hands have to become coming out even slower as you come out, because we're becoming wider on the wheel and we have to wait for this whole wheel to come around one circular motion before we can move our hands up. So if we're in the center, that happens pretty quickly, but as we get wider and wider, you actually have to slow your hands down, which the tendency is to kind of speed up because you think, oh gee, I'm done, I'm almost done, I can go a little bit quicker here, okay? So I worked with my sponge. I also like to work with a rounded edge rib when I'm making a plate like this, because I can just come in and hang out and compress this. And it's taking, the plate is taking the shape of that curve. So you can use your, the credit card or the hotel key card ribs. You can cut your own nice curved rib for this if you don't have one already. You can use the metal rib. I'm now supporting on the back side, and I'm just slowly kind of creeping my inside hand up with the rib, and I'm just compressing this and really working this curve just back and forth. And I'm making a tiny little pull with that. Okay, I know that I'm not to 9 inches yet, but what I am gonna do here is I am gonna use my wooden knife tool, which is right here, and I'm gonna make a little undercut under here for my wooden knife, for my wire tool. I'm not taking a ton of clay off there. I'm hanging out just for a moment to compress that clay a little bit. Again, that part of the piece of the pot doesn't get touched very much either, and so there's a lot of compressing and shrinkage that can happen there. So I'm just kind of compressing that, cleaning that up. Nice clean place for my wire tool. And I want to do this now before I do my final stretching, because I'm going to stretch this out, and then it's hard to get in there with the tool without knocking the rim. So now I'm going to do my final stretching. I'm going to slow down just a little bit. I'm supporting on the outside. I'm always going to start in the middle and slowly creep out with my rib. And I am going to just push, I'm putting a little bit more pressure right here, and I'm just stretching this thing out. And I am making a little bit of a pull, just because there was a little bit of extra thick clay right there that I just wanted to move out. I'm going to take my rib, round off that edge. I'm going to check. I've got a little bit, like, I'm at 8, I'm about 8.5, a little on the generous side of 8.5. So I am going to try and make just a little pull, kind of lifting from the back side and using my rib as if they were my fingers. And I'm just grabbing this clay. And then compressing that floor a little bit more. There we are, 9 inches. Okay. So the last thing you're gonna do is just, you can take your sponge, get any extra water off of there, compress your rim. You can also go ahead and use the plastic as a little kind of rim cleaner upper. I'm gonna turn this off, and very, very tight. I have to adjust this wheel. Very, very tight, press down, and pull it through. Okay, I'm gonna stop the video.